quite a number of issues, really. This morning, we're being joined by security consultant Ladi Thompson from our Abuja studio. Good morning, and thank you for joining us on Sunrise Daily. Well, I remember the last time we had a conversation on this program. It was about the Kaduna killings and reprisals. Just interestingly, over the weekend, we had killings also there, killings and counter-killings. But today, we're discussing the issue of the rice farmers, the killings of rice farmers in Borno State. We've heard different, reactions at the presidency level. Now you've seen at the National Assembly, but I'm thinking for you, because I know you have followed these issues, how did you internalize this recent killings and the reactions that have followed?
Well, let's look at it like this, that the reactions that we are seeing are highly emotive, and that is understandable. But if we want to look at it from a strategic point of view, we must remember that terrorism is the instrument of weak people who have no direct access to power. And so you see the clinical use of terror, whether it is to kill soft targets or to do something bizarre, it has an objective. And if the objective is to break the will of the nation, create confusion, multiply fear, what is going on in Nigeria right now is something that will make the terrorists very happy. And I say this responsibly in that I think there needs to be a lot more of consultations from both sides. Because when I listen to the rhetoric that is coming from, the upper and the lower houses and also the spokesmen for the president, it is obvious that we need to do a lot more briefings. They need to get more consultants to brief them that the objective of killing those farmers was simply to break the will of the nation, spread fear, and also, I think what is most important is that the media reporting of it also needs to gain a lot more professional advice so that these reactions will be better informed. You see, once killings like that happen, the terrorists also rely on reporting the media as a force multiplier. If you ask me, a lot of the reactions you are seeing, it's a mixture of fear, because right now it's dawning on people in authority that, look, if things keep going on like this, there may be no nation to speak about. But the best thing to do is that we need to be informed properly. And when you're well informed, you will find out that the rhetoric will change. If you want me to give you an example, I'll say to you that calling to the president and say, hey, get rid of all your service chiefs, it's a bit confrontational. It is not exactly the right steps to take when we are viewing what has just happened in Borno State. And for those who are calling for all sorts of measures, and in fact, the people who are even responding are making matters worse, because they are making the president to look as if he's like a recalcitrant person who digs in for no apparent reason. Now, I believe that the tack that we should take is very simple. For people in the upper and lower houses, they should refer to the 2019 National Security Strategy document that was signed by the president in 2019. And recently, you remember, he asked for an upgrade in it. If they looked at that document, they'll discover that there are about three basic things that are first mentioned, which is the national interest, and not only national interest, I'll try to remember what the other subheadings are. But when you look at the subheadings, national objectives, national interest, and the national values. Now, if the people in the upper and the lower houses were to read through that document, they could simply call on the president and say, look, you endorsed this document, you asked for an upgrade in the architecture of security. But looking at the trend since you made that request, it is obvious that things are not going in the direction that they ought to be going. And so we'll have some suggestions to make because of the future of our nation. And I'm talking like this because I know what is at stake. Might be that a number of people who are not, who don't really have a lot of knowledge about what we're dealing with. You see, it's like a medical doctor who's specialized, who is looking at Ebola coming in, and people think they're dealing with a headache. So I would say that language matters. The reporting of terror also matters. We need to do a lot more consulting. We need to educate the nation more. And then everybody needs to realize that the military, calling for the service chiefs for them to resign and all that, let me tell you one simple truth that I have said for more than 10 years. When you want to solve a terrorism problem, the military aspect, kinetics, all the military can do, maximum is 37% of the solution. You don't need to do much research. 19%, some say, maximum 37% of the solution. So if you asked me, I would say to you that the call is not really that the president should sack the service chiefs, but rather that we need to expand and create some extra offices that will work hand in hand with the service chiefs. We're dealing with something
if we
that
can
is very
just
opportunistic.
take those issues. Pardon me, if we could just take some of the issues so we don't lose sight of, some of the things you've mentioned. If we could take them one after the other. First, you said that the response you have seen are largely emotive, and you talked about reporting terrorism. But lest we forget, the facts are there. Over 40 farmers were killed on a certain day. There was something that led to that, and of course the aftermath. And that has largely been what media has put out there, the facts, especially for people who stay in that area, what they have gone through, what they are going through right now. And naturally, people will respond. You might have more information than other people, but the question now will be, how do you expect people who are seeing these killings, and they have seen these killings for decades, how do you expect them to respond when the facts are just there for them?
Well, naturally, for the citizen and the average person, we will be very emotive in our responses. But you see, for people in leadership, they need to understand that they're going to be responsible for the future of the nation at all levels of leadership. And that's why the onus is on leadership to be better informed, to understand that, number one, the reason why they've killed these people in this gruesome manner is that there's an objective to it. And that if in their reaction to these events, to these gruesome killings, they play into the hands of the terrorists who initiated the atrocity in the first place, it would not prosper Nigeria. So you see, the onus is on leadership, which is, everything rises and falls with leadership, that leadership has to gain a proper understanding. Listen, this thing collapses nations from within. The first thing that some nations do, once they were able to decipher that there's a terrorism problem on their soil, they have recognized that it's a global problem, it's a new type of war, asymmetrical, hybrid threats. They gain a lot of knowledge about it, and then they learn how to handle it. I'm saying to you that as long as we allow these emotive responses, don't forget that when you go to a hospital, the doctors say, everybody calm down and let's get to work. If the doctors broke down and began to weep and shout and scream, what should the relatives of the victims then do? So the bottom line is this. In this nation, we also need more consultation on how to report on terror in such a way that it will put the terrorists to disadvantage. Now, every nation knows something. If you don't unite your nation, terrorists will end up winning, because what they want to do is to provoke a reaction, an irrational reaction from you. And that's what we're getting right now. And I'm saying to you that this is only because the amount of information and knowledge.
Yeah, just a moment. Just a moment, if you don't mind.
Leadership right now.
Yeah. Well, that information, yes, that if that information available to leadership is expanded, are the consequences lost on leadership? You said, earlier when you were speaking that terrorism is an instrument of the weak to gain undue advantage. I want to believe that that information is not lost on leadership. Or is it lost on leadership? Because if they're aware of this, I would expect, and Nigerians would expect, that the reactions would have been different, and consequently, our results would have been different. Now, you have also underscored the fact that we have been reactive as opposed to being proactive. So I would assume, as many would, that if this information was not lost on leadership at of those who are managing our security architecture, if this information is not lost on them, the consequences of those actions would not be lost on them, and consequently our reactions and our results will probably be different. How do you respond?
Okay, let me repeat again that this terrorism war is a new war form. And what is happening to us as a nation is that we are on a very expensive learning curve. Many nations of the world that are better organized in terms of research and who appreciate knowledge much more are able to cope faster with this. Now, the traditional response everywhere usually is military in the first step. But very soon, most nations of the world have learned to, first of all, define terrorism in a way that benefits their nation, and then to appoint bodies. Their line of defense will now be tailored for asymmetrical warfare and hybrid threats. And then there are at least 4 things that every nation of the world must put into place if we're really going to, if you want to win a war against terrorism. So what you are seeing, I repeat again, is just a learning curve. I don't want to, you see, interestingly, my own objective here is that, like a medical doctor who's looking at a progression of a disease, who's letting you know that, look, the symptom is this is going to the next phase. He may sound clinical, doesn't mean that he doesn't care. What he's trying to get you to see is that if you don't take the right medicine, you don't diagnose properly, you don't get these things right, worse things are coming. And this is what we've been saying for the past 10
you have, I think,
years.
I think there is a need for us to really
kept escalating.
Yeah, you have said, this analogy about the medical practice and all of that, and that's understandable. But as we said earlier, people are dying. As I think, is it the United Nations has said that at the very least over the past 10 years, about 30,000 people have died as a result of this. So if this is an experiment of sorts, quoting what you have just said, how many people are going to die or will be killed by these insurgents, these terrorists, before we get to the root of the matter?
For us to get to the root of the matter, we are going to have a need, there's going to be a need for us to calm down and then clinically assess this situation and then talk about the things that we need to put into place so that we can actually win and not lose at the end of the day. It is a war form.
My apologies. My apologies.
It's a global war form.
Yeah, it's global. But all crime, as you security experts will tell us, are local. Okay? Now, for how long are we going to have to wait? If you can just give us you're saying we should calm down, and people have been calming down. How long do we need to do this? This calming down, this clinical approach that you're talking about, shouldn't it have been done like 10 years ago, worst case 5, 6 years ago, so that the kind of thing that we're having now does not happen again? Now, you're saying also that the call for the sack of service chiefs is not likely to solve the problem. How then will the problem be solved if this clinical approach you are looking at, this clinical analysis you're talking about, hasn't been done over the past 10 years?
Good. Now that you say this, let me say something to you. There's nothing new about this thing. It's been around with us for quite a while. It's just that its stages have been increasing, and we've been talking about it for more than 15, 16, almost 20 years actually, that we began to talk to the nation that, look, this is coming. I was in Dogon Nahawa, that was in 2010, when the Fulanese had a reprisal attack in Plateau State. almost 1,000 people. I spoke to the survivors and all that. And what I'm trying to point out to you is this, is that if we really want to win, let us remember that, number one, a nation that is not united cannot win a war against terror. Let us remember that this thing has a method to its madness. And that unless we decode that methodology and we sit down and responsibly, put into place what is needful, we should not expect a miracle out of the air. Now, finally, when I said to you that the military aspect of this, of the cure to this malice, to this problem, to this threat to our nation's sovereignty, I said the military aspect is only 19 to 37%. So I'm saying to you that if the military chiefs have done what they know to do, but don't forget that the traditional training of the armed forces has a chain of command that is like a pyramid. And that when you come against this asymmetrical warfare, one of the first things every nation is doing is deconstructing the chain of command to be able to respond quickly. Don't also forget again that you are dealing with a totally unorthodox form of warfare. Don't forget again that what you think is local, a lot of the thinking and the strategy and the training of those who are hitting you and those who are training those who are hitting us in this nation is not done within the borders of Nigeria. So I'm saying to you right now that the defense strategy needs to be expanded up to the point. I'll give you an idea now. This thing is opportunistic. It looks at every fault line, looks at every line of division that your nation has or any nation has. And what it does is to deepen the cracks of the lines of division. Like I said to you, it is so opportunistic that it likes to collapse nations from within. In maybe in more basic parlance, it will use your own strength against you, because when you panic and your responses start becoming irrational, instead of strengthening the nation, you are weakening your nation. Now, what I'm trying to point out to you is that if we expand that board, for instance, I will tell you something, that food security is part of what is being targeted in the country. Now, when you know that food security is being targeted, you realize that somebody needs to be put on ground who needs to study all over the world and look at the Nigerian system of agriculture and know that this is primitive. And look and says, look, if you want to survive what is going on and the attacks against this country, part of the war against terror is that we need to initiate smart agriculture. And when we initiate smart agriculture, food security will not be something that they can use against us. Now, what we're talking about is a hydra. I don't want to go into all these details here, but what suffices is this. It is not the fault of the military men. What they are trained to do, the traditional chain of command, their traditional training will at best supply 37%. And this is the disadvantage that every nation has when terrorism comes to play. A nation can foil 25 terrorist attempts. The one that succeeds will almost destabilize the nation. And so you see, the odds are stacked because of this unconventional form of warfare. Your enemy has no uniform. Your enemy has no identified barracks. Your enemy has no rules of engagement. Your enemy can use a woman to carry a suicide bomb vest. How do you overcome such a person or such persons except you get back and think it through properly? Okay. And then you have responses that are measured. Let me tell you, I've been in this, I've watched over this country to the point that at times, if you keep crying, they know you. All this noise going on in the media right now is going to peter out in the next 2 weeks. So the terrorists know how long to wait for you in Nigeria for you to calm down and really do nothing apart from fight each other over decisions and not do anything really new. You seem to have energies in fighting one another, which was the objective anyway.
Okay, let me see if I could do a quick recap. I mean, the issues you have raised. So you've talked about unity. You've talked about, expanding our defense strategy. And you also mentioned that maybe this is not really the fault of the military. You said they're responsible for less than 40% in this whole war against terrorism. That's given. I mean, for you, the kind of work you do, that's understandable. But don't forget again there are people who experience this on a daily basis. Just in that community, they've lost over 40 people. And for them, the way they internalize it is quite different. So the challenge is now bridging that divide. So there's a thinking at the high levels to say, and then there's a thinking at the masses level. So the big question is how to bridge that divide. There's a lot of options that have been put on the table in terms of military might, hiring mercenaries and all that. But the question is, how do you begin to bridge such divide? So at least we're on the same page.
Yes, okay, let me just break down a few things. That may just help you to understand the direction in which I'm thinking. A lot of these are not things that are going to be discussed on television or public or media. These are things that devolve on leadership to research, to do, and execute. And when you see the results, that's what makes you a lot more confident that your country is safe. So let me give you just one example. Right now, as long as the terrorists are watching what is happening in Nigeria, like I said to you, they're Hydra. They're looking at your economy. They're looking at your agriculture. They're looking at many aspects. They're looking not just to scare you, but just by committing atrocities, a method to their madness. So you are going to have to respond by I've said this for years, 4 things into place. Every nation has them. Number 1, you have to adapt your military strategies and improve your interagency cooperation. Number 2, you must get a superior value system for your nation. You must have a superior ideology for your nation. And you must have a superior architecture of thought. You can't afford to be on the same steps, at the same level with the thinking of those who are terrorizing your nation. You have to be at least 12 to 15 steps ahead of them, get into their heads, think ahead, anticipate, and understand their modus operandi so that you can actually begin to win victories and stop just reacting, and doing the obvious things that they've set out to provoke you to do in the first place. Like I told you, I've watched this happen over the past 20 years from the trickles of blood.
Just one last thing. Last thing. Yes, my apologies. Just one last thing. You said that the most solution that can come from the military, at best, 37%. And you have also said that there is a need for us, you use the word we, to come together and decide some things, especially at the leadership level. So one can then say that you have said, you've alluded that a quarter, no bigger, but 1/3 of the solution, or a little over 1/3 of the solution will come from the military. Who are the other critical stakeholders here? You've mentioned food security as well. You've talked about the economy. Regional summits have been held, and this is where we are. Who are the other critical stakeholders in this conversation about tackling insurgency and terrorism in Nigeria?
Well, that's the beauty of what you're asking. If you ask me, with proper consultations, what the upper house and the lower house and the presidency should be doing right now is huddling together, coming together to realize that, look, if we are at each other's throats, we are going to lose this nation. And if we lose a nation, where will the upper house be? Where will the lower house be? Where will the presidency be? And once there's a coming together with one mind and one purpose, which is to preserve the sovereignty of our nation, you will find out that it wouldn't be too difficult to assemble the platform and the team that will augment the military aspect. Let me drop one more for you just before I go. The nations that have survived terrorism and are handling it well, they have to do something if they really want to make it. You see, as long as a nation continues to reckon wealth in terms of material things and does not cross over to the level where wealth is measured by knowledge. What I'm trying to point out, in 1998 or so, thereabouts, I remember there was a country, I think it was in Rwanda, that one opinion says they raided the neighbor's DRC because of one rare metal that is used in the manufacture of foams and coltan, and that it is said that they made about $240 million a year from that. Now, compare that to a nation like China that doesn't need to raid any other country for anything, and simply goes into IT manufacturing, partners with cutting-edge manufacturing, and it is said that they make in one day what Rwanda was making in 1 year. Now, Nigeria needs to understand that we need to up our game. We need to introduce even measures like blockchain. Because right now, if we're waiting for the conventional economy and all that, Nigeria is headed for a disaster. We need to introduce private blockchains and things like that and see that we are dealing with a very sophisticated thing. It looks crude in its execution, but it is highly sophisticated. And unless we up our own game, honestly, you are dealing with a foe that watches you, knows you, and then will gradually creep on you, collapse a nation from within.
Well,
but
Reverend Thompson,
that will not happen to us because Nigeria has the brilliance, we have the men, we have the manpower, we have the intelligence.
Well, Reverend Thompson, you're not leaving just yet, pardon me. We'll need to go on a break. And when we come back, I mean, some short-term solutions have been given. I would like you to respond to them and maybe how effective they can be in this fight against terrorism. So please stay with us. You're welcome back. Well, Reverend Ladi Thompson, a security consultant, is still with us on the program. Thank you for staying with us. Now, we just saw the meeting which the governors in the region had yesterday, and some of the issues that came out is that proposal to have mercenaries, added to this fight. And I mean, when you put that side by side with the statement of the president saying that the president has given all the needed support, in fact, the government has given all the needed support to the armed forces to take all necessary steps to protect the country's population and its territory, pretty much saying that we've tried our best. And don't forget, he also said the military's role in this is limited, below 40%. So to that extent, would you say the introduction, or in fact, considering adding mercenaries to this war would be a good idea?
Well, let me say first of all, that if the president had not spoken like that, he himself will have become a POI, a person of interest. The fact that the president opened up and said, look, his colleagues, Petraeus, all over the world, if what he has is a military training and he has deployed the military training and he's facing a new war form that now defies all the textbooks that were available in the days they were trained for warfare, I think we're listening to a very sincere comment that should be taken with all seriousness. And that's why I came to buttress and said, look, max under 40%, 37% is what all the military efforts can contribute. Now, coming to the issue of mercenaries, I think it will be a grievous error to bring in mercenaries. Rather, I think the direction we need to go is very simple. Why do I say mercenaries will be a grievous error? We are still battling the train of thought that has permitted militants who are captured to be debriefed and the notion of them being now absorbed into the Nigerian army. We are still battling that thought process as to how it was arrived at and who initiated it and how it managed to pass through to become acceptable. Now, one of the challenges we have with this war form is that it also uses infiltrations a lot. So when you say mercenaries now, who is going to be bringing in the mercenaries? Who's going to be paying the mercenaries? Where is he sourcing them from? And how are we sure that these are mercenaries who really have the interest of the nation on hand? Some of the things that have been going on in the war front, we know they're not subjects for discussion on TV. But I would say something that what we need to do rather is to go the way of UAVs, unmanned air vehicles, or drones rather. Let's go the way of drones. For the love of me, I'm still wondering how come we have not developed in Nigerian. Look, drone technology is not nuclear physics. Drones technology will cut down 60-something% of the casualties. There are drones today that are fitted with facial recognition. Drone technology deployed in the Northeast will turn the tide of battle. Not only should drone technology be deployed in the Northeast, it should also be part of the economic package of the country There are other countries today where they're using drones to deliver medicines to villages. They're using them, to serve the economy. I would have thought that Nigeria should be in the forefront of this. So trust me, instead of looking for mercenaries and all that, we should go more intelligent, because we are dealing with a very intelligent enemy that is also has access to funding that is much more than what is available locally in Nigeria. So I believe that the UAV option is not only cheaper, it's much more efficient. And just as you start to use your UAVs, don't forget that there are many other technologies that are available today that can be deployed. Number two, Nigeria has neglected to develop the proper lobby teams in many nations of the world. So when there's a lot of talk about how there's equipment that we should have that we don't have. Now, it's not anybody's fault. It's the fact that the enemy that is taking Nigeria apart has his own lobby global effort that is stripping Nigeria's foreign policy in the nations of the world. So Nigeria too has to groom enough people, send them to the different nations where it matters, so that we can get a lot more equipment and then also create local institutions. I can tell you something, there are Nigerians who can produce drones from scrap and also fit them with gadgetry that will work for us.
Yeah, Reverend, you also said earlier that we run a risk. By the way, it's also out there in public domain that the Nigeria Air Force has procured or produced some UAVs that have been deployed. How effective those are, I guess, then that's also something that we'll wait to see. But there was something you said that, this news might peter out over the next 2 weeks or thereabout, and it is assumed that we will do nothing, and consequently, the same thing can recur. How do we avoid that? If we have to do anything, I know you referenced it earlier, what are the specifics? If you will not be releasing any security information of the kind of collaboration that ought to begin now, so that within the next 2 weeks, something really does happen strategically that will help us to win this war.
Well, even though our democracy is nascent, this is the beauty of democracy. I think that the different people in areas that are affected need to mount pressure on their representatives, mount massive pressure. And let's not forget that this is not confined to the Northeast. There's a lot of trouble going on in all parts of the nation. And when pressure is mounted on the reps, on senators and all that, I believe that they will be able to coalesce into a formidable front that has a strong word of advice for the presidency, and then works as the counterbalance to the presidency as democracy was designed to work. You see, that way, instead of spending the emotive energy, making noise, and this is cathartic, when people sort of make noise, they cry and all that, and your enemies know how many days you used to mourn, make noise, and calm down. And then they'll wait another while and then launch another one. So to avoid that, we have to be measured, we have to be disciplined, we have to be focused, and the people need to continue to pile pressure on those who are voted in to ensure the security of lives and property.
Well, security consultant Ladi Thompson, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us on Sunrise Daily this morning.
Pleasure is mine always.